Wyoming Territory, June of 1878. The wind howled low through the pine ridges as Rhea Forrester stepped off the back of the freight wagon and disappeared into the tall grass behind the barn. Her dress was dusty, torn at the hem. Her boots, half a size too big, belonged to a dead girl the undertaker never came for. She had not eaten since the train stop in Laramie. But she was free. She pressed herself against the wooden slats of the barn, chest heaving. The pain in her ribs throbbed where her brother-in-law had kicked her 2 nights ago. She still heard his voice when she blinked too long, slurred and mean, telling her she'd be nothing without the family name. That she owed them every breath. That her place was under their thumb. She had run anyway. The cattle ranch stretched across a wide plain under the shadow of the snowy range. She did not know its name, only that the man who drove the wagon said they were hiring hands and did not ask questions. That was good enough. A door creaked behind her and she spun. A man stood in the barn doorway, backlit by the warm gold of the late afternoon sun. His hat shaded his face, but she saw the strong line of his jaw, the way he stood like he had been built from stone and stubbornness. "You lost." His voice was low and steady. She straightened. "No. I am looking for work." His eyes narrowed. "You do not look like a ranch hand." "I can cook, clean, stitch. I am not afraid of dirt." He stepped closer, and in that moment she could see him clearly. His eyes were dark green, steady, and watchful. A scar ran through his brow like a mark of old trouble, but there was no cruelty in his face. Only weariness. And caution. "You got a name?" "Rhea," she said. "Rhea Forrester." He hesitated. "Emmett Granger. I run this place." She swallowed. Her heart beat hard in her chest. "I will take anything," she said. "I just need to stay." Emmett studied her a long time. Then he nodded toward the bunkhouse behind him. "There's a spare bed in the cook's quarters. You keep your head down, do your work, and no one here will bother you." Her knees nearly buckled with relief. "Thank you." He started to turn, then paused. "You running from someone?" She held his gaze. "Yes." He nodded once. "Then you are safe here." The days passed in long, quiet hours. Rhea worked from sunup to sundown, scrubbing floors, making biscuits, hauling water. The Cowboys kept their distance, polite but distant. Except for Emmett. He was always near. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried weight. He always noticed when her hands bled from scrubbing, when her limp was worse. He left a jar of salve on her windowsill one night without a word. She never mentioned it, but used it all the same. One morning, she found him fixing the corral fence alone. She walked over with a pail of water and handed it to him. "You always do everything yourself?" she asked. He took a long drink, eyes on her. "Trust comes slow around here." "I understand." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Where were you before this?" She hesitated. "Casper. My husband died 3 months ago. His family. They thought I owed them something. They were wrong." He nodded slowly. "You got any children?" "No," she lied. She had 2, Violet and Vera. Her girls. Just 6 and 4. But she had not seen them since the night she fled. Her sister-in-law had taken them, locked the nursery door, and screamed that Rhea would never see them again. That a woman who disobeyed her place did not deserve to be a mother. The ache in her chest never lessened. That night, she woke to voices. Then a crash. She grabbed the iron fire poker from near the hearth and crept to the window. A rider had come through the front gate. Emmett stood outside, shirt half-buttoned, rifle in hand. "You are not welcome here," he said. Rhea blinked hard. The man on the horse, it was her brother-in-law, Charles. He sneered from the saddle. "She is my dead brother's wife. She belongs to our family. I am taking her back." "No, you are not," Emmett said. Charles dismounted. "You think you can hide her?" "She ran off with our money, left her children behind. I have law on my side." Emmett stepped forward. "You come back with a warrant or not at all. Get off my land." Rhea's hands shook. She stepped onto the porch, poker tight in her grip. "She is not your property," Emmett said again, voice hard. "And she is not going anywhere." Charles stared at her, then spat in the dirt. "This is not over." He rode off into the dark. Emmett turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, breathing hard. "Thank you." He looked at her a long moment. You are not alone anymore. The next week passed like a storm waiting to break. Emmett kept her close, always watching the horizon. He did not say much, but he started taking his meals in the cookhouse. Sat across from her every evening, quiet and steady. One night she told him about the girls. I left them behind, she whispered. I had no choice. He would have killed me. He reached across the table and took her hand. Then we will get them back. She looked up, eyes wide. You do not have to do that. I know, he said, but I want to. Rhea swallowed thickly. His hand was warm and strong around hers. They rode out at dawn. It took 2 days to reach the town where Charles lived, a small settlement near the river. Emmett stayed close, rifle strapped across his back. They waited until dark, then crept through the orchard behind the house. Rhea's heart felt like thunder in her chest. She saw them through the nursery window, Violet asleep on the floor, Vera curled in a blanket. She bit her lip hard to stop from crying out. Emmett picked the lock on the back door. They moved silent as ghosts through the kitchen, up the stairs. Rhea scooped the girls into her arms, whispering their names. Are we going home, Mama? Violet asked, sleepy. Yes, baby. We are. They slipped out before anyone stirred. Back at the ranch, Emmett gave them the spare room in his house. Rhea laid the girls in bed, then stepped out onto the porch. The stars were bright above them. The wind was calm. He stood there, arms crossed, watching the hills. She walked up beside him. Why did you help me? He looked down at her. Because I wanted to. She took a breath. I never thought I would find someone like you. He touched her face, fingers gentle. And I never thought I would feel this again. She leaned into him. I want to stay. Then stay. He kissed her slow, sure, like he had known her soul longer than her face. She kissed him back, heartful, hands trembling against his chest. The girls slept safe inside. And for the first time in years, Rhea knew what it felt like to be truly loved. The first snow fell early that year, dry flakes drifting over the high plains like ash shaken from the sky. Rhea stood at the kitchen window, sleeves rolled and hands dusted with flour, watching the girls chase each other around the front yard. Their laughter rose above the hush of the wind. Emmett had mended the yard fence the week before, splitting cedar posts with an old axe that had belonged to his father. He'd said little while he worked, but when Violet brought him a leather strap to tie back his hair, he'd crouched to her level and thanked her as if she were grown. Rhea had watched from the porch, a strange warmth blooming in her chest that hadn't faded since. She wiped her hands and stepped outside. He was seated on the edge of the porch, sharpening the blade of a draw knife with a whetstone. His sleeves were rolled too, revealing forearms laced with old scarring fence wire, from the look of it. His hat was hooked on his knee, and the wind ruffled his dark hair. He looked up when she approached but didn't stop working. I've been thinking, she said. He set the stone down. About what? About the girls. They're too old for me to teach everything on my own. I want them to start reading again. Properly. He nodded once. There's a schoolhouse in Elk Hollow, 3 miles south. One teacher and not much else. I don't want to leave them there, she said quickly. Not yet. You wouldn't have to. He leaned back against the rail. I could ride you down there once a week. Stay nearby. We'd be back before dark. She smiled, then caught herself. You do that. If it helps them grow up right, yes. They've taken to you, she said, sitting beside him. They trust you. I hadn't noticed, he said, though the corners of his mouth twitched. She let her shoulder touch his. You don't have to pretend you don't care. He didn't answer right away. A hawk circled above the far field, wings wide and still. I lost my sister in Kansas, he said finally. Years back. She had a boy, not yet walking. Her husband was a drunk. When she died, I tried to take the child, but the courts gave him to his father. I heard later the boy didn't make it past 5. Rhea reached for his hand. I'm sorry. You get used to things, he said. But I never got used to that. She laced her fingers with his. You have a second chance now. With us. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. I know. By late December, the girls could sound out short verses and write their names steady. Emmett built them a narrow desk from old barnwood and set it by the hearth. Rhea kept the fire stoked and brewed tea with dried mint from the slope behind the house. One afternoon, Vera scraped her knee on the cellar steps. She didn't cry, just looked down at the blood and said, "Mama, I think I broke." Emmett was already reaching for a clean cloth. "You didn't break. You just bruised." "I don't like blood," she whispered. He tied the cloth snug, then handed her a peppermint from the tin in his coat. "You're braver than most grown men I know." She studied him while she sucked the candy. "Are you going to stay when it's summer?" He looked at Rhea across the room. "I plan to." Spring came hard, with rain that washed the gullies clean and left the pastures thick with green. Rhea planted beans and squash behind the cookhouse, and Emmett built a low fence to keep the mule deer out. The girls pressed seeds into the wet earth with solemn care. One morning, Emmett came in early from the pasture, his coat damp and boots heavy. "Marshall passed through town," he said, hanging his hat. "Said Charles filed a petition in Cheyenne. Claims you took the girls against his will." Rhea's breath caught in her throat. "They're not his." "I know that. You know that. But the courts don't always care. What can we do?" He unbuckled his belt and laid it on the bench, jaw tight. "We go to Cheyenne ourselves. File a statement. Bring testimony. I've already sent word to the Reverend who married you and your husband. He'll vouch that Charles never had custody." She folded her arms. "You already sent word?" "I did. Without asking?" He stepped closer. "Because I knew you'd try to shoulder it alone. And you don't have to anymore." Her eyes stung. "You always say the right thing in the quietest way." He touched her cheek, his thumb warm. "That's because I mean it." They made the trip in early May, Emmett driving the wagon while the girls sat nestled between sacks of oats and Rhea's sewing basket. Cheyenne was louder than she remembered, the streets busy with freight haulers and soldiers. They stayed in a boarding house run by a widow who kept a shotgun behind the parlor curtain. Emmett wore his cleanest shirt and answered every question with calm precision. When the clerk asked if he was kin, he said, "Not yet. But I will be." Rhea turned to him once they were outside. "You said that like it was already done." He reached for her hand. "I said it because it will be." The ruling came 2 weeks later, delivered by post. Full custody awarded to the mother. No visitation rights for the uncle. Rhea read it 3 times, then folded it slowly and placed it in the cedar box she kept by her bedside. That night, Emmett poured warm water into the basin and knelt to wash her feet. "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "I know." Her fingers brushed his hair. "You're not the man I ran from. You're the man I ran toward." He lifted his head. "Then marry me." She nodded, breath-catching. "I will." The girls stood in the doorway, sleepy-eyed and barefoot. "Are we gonna have a wedding?" Vera asked. Rhea smiled through her tears. "Yes, baby." "We are." And in that quiet house, with the rain pattering soft against the roof, they began the life they'd fought so hard to claim. The morning Rhea sewed her wedding dress, the plains were quiet as bone. No wind, no birdsong, just the hush of cloth beneath her needle and the soft scrape of Emmett splitting kindling outside. The house smelled of yeast and hickory smoke. A spring wren hopped along the windowsill, watching her work with bright, quick eyes. She used the last of the bleached muslin folded inside her cedar chest, the same fabric she'd once planned to make Violet's baptism gown from. Her hands moved slowly, not from uncertainty, but from a kind of reverence. Every stitch was a choice. Every thread meant she was no longer running. Violet helped sort the lace trim, her fingers careful. "Is this what brides always wear?" Rhea smiled without looking up. "Not always. But this one's mine, so I get to decide." Vera sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing shapes in the dust with the blunt end of a hairpin. "Will you kiss?" "Yes," Rhea said softly. "I will." The girls giggled, but not unkindly. Outside, the axe paused. Emmett must have heard. That afternoon, he came in with a box tucked under one arm. Not wrapped, just pine boards nailed together. He set it on the table and stepped back. "What's this?" she asked. He opened it with the claw of his hammer. Inside lay a pair of boots. Leather, black, finely stitched. Not new, but well-oiled and clearly cared for. "They were my mother's," he said, "passed down through her side. Worn once, then stored away." Rhea touched the soft edge of the shaft. "They're beautiful. They'll fit." She glanced up. "You're sure? I measured your step last winter. The prints you left by the smokehouse." She laughed, surprised. "You've been planning this longer than I thought." He didn't deny it. They married the following Sunday, just after sunrise. The Reverend from Elk Hollow met them beneath the cottonwood tree at the edge of the property. The girls picked wildflowers and stood like sentinels, one on each side. Emmett wore his father's coat, brushed free of dust, and the silver ring his sister had once worn was slipped onto Rhea's hand with steady fingers. No guests. No piano. Just the rustle of new leaves and a single vow spoken by two people who'd already done the hardest parts of loving. Afterward, Vera leaned against Emmett's leg, arms crossed. "Are you ours now?" He rested a hand on her head. "I've been yours a while." They didn't throw rice. They didn't need to. That evening, once the girls were asleep and the fire burned low, Rhea sat cross-legged on the floor beside Emmett, her head against his shoulder. "I used to think peace was something other people were allowed to have," she murmured. He ran his fingers through her hair, slow. "It's not given. It's built. I didn't know how to build before. You do now." She turned to face him. "Will you tell me something I don't already know about you?" He thought for a moment. "When I was 16, I tried to ride a bull down in Texas. Lasted 4 seconds. Broke my collarbone and swore I'd never be that stupid again." She laughed, soft and rich. "I can't picture that. I was thinner, more bone than sense." She traced the scar near his collarbone with one finger. "I like you better now." He caught her hand and kissed the palm. "I like you with paint stains on your skirt and flour in your hair. I didn't know love could be so quiet," she whispered. "It's the quiet that makes it strong." Later, when the coals glowed low and she drifted against him, he laid a blanket over her shoulders and pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." Her breath steadied. "Always." And outside, the wind picked up again, brushing through the grass like fingers smoothing a page already written. The morning air carried the scent of wet sage and river silt. Rhea crouched beside the creek running behind the north pasture, sleeves rolled to her elbows, soaking a length of linen she'd dyed with crushed pokeberries. Beside her, Vera lined up flat stones, careful not to let her skirt drag in the mud. "Do you think mama birds miss their nests when they fly away?" Vera asked, not looking up. Rhea wrung out the cloth. "They don't leave for long. Just enough to bring back something better." Vera nodded like she understood more than she could say. Across the water, a mule deer lifted its head from the willows, then bounded silently into the trees. Back at the house, Violet was helping Emmett fit a new hinge on the barn door. She'd taken to following him when chores allowed, asking questions about wood grain and saddle straps, her brow furrowed like a grown woman half the time. Rhea watched from the yard as Emmett handed her a square of beeswax and showed her how to rub it along the threads of a screw. "You always this patient?" Rhea asked when he joined her later, hands still smelling faintly of pitch. He leaned against the porch rail, his gaze steady on the hills. "I wasn't once. What changed?" "I broke a man's arm in a saloon in Rawlins," he said plainly. "Thought he cheated me at cards. Turned out he hadn't. I sat with that mistake a long time." She sat beside him, wiping her damp hands on her apron. "You don't seem like a man who acts without thinking." "I became one. After." Violet came running from the barn, straw in her hair. The calves limping again. Emmett rose without hesitation, already reaching for his coat. "I'll take a look." "I can come," Rhea offered. He shook his head. "Finish what you're doing. I'll be back before supper." Rhea watched him stride across the yard, sure-footed and quiet. She hadn't asked what haunted him before Wyoming, but she'd begun to see how his silences held shape like carved wood, not empty air. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Emmett brought out a folded map and laid it across the table. The oil lamp flickered over the worn creases. "I've been thinking about the land east of the ridge," he said. "There's water enough for grazing, and it's been lying fallow since Old Man Thayer passed." Rhea leaned in. You want to buy it? Split it. Fence half for cattle, the rest for planting. If we build a second house out that way, the girls could have space when they're grown. She traced the line of the creek with her finger. You've thought this through. I've been thinking about what comes after peace. Rhea folded the edge of the map. And if the Thayer claim's been taken? Then we find another way. But I want this to grow. She looked up at him. So do I. The next day, a rider came from Elk Hollow with news. The schoolteacher had taken ill and wouldn't return until autumn. With no one to keep the schoolhouse open, the children would be turned away. Rhea read the note twice, then set it down. There's no one else? The rider shook his head. Not unless they send someone from Laramie. Emmett waited until the man had gone. You could teach them. The town children? Yours too. You've done it once. You've the patience for it. She hesitated. They might not listen to me. You've earned more trust in that town than you think. She looked out the window, where the road curled toward Elk Hollow like a thread laid loose across the land. I'll ride in tomorrow. That night, as she packed her satchel with ledgers and chalk, Emmett stood at the doorway, arms crossed. You're not afraid of much anymore. I'm still afraid, she said softly. I've just stopped letting it decide for me. He stepped behind her, arms around her waist. You've come farther than anyone gave you credit for. She leaned into him. So have you. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of cottonwood resin and damp grass. The lamp burned low on the table beside them, casting long shadows against the walls, the kind made not from fear, but from something living and whole. They stood like that until the wick gave out. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of Elk Hollow, its paint sun-faded and chipped, with a stovepipe that leaned like it had given up on standing straight through another winter. Rhea stepped through the door just after sunrise, the girls trailing behind her, their slates tucked beneath their arms. Dust hung in the air, stirred by their footsteps, and the windows rattled faintly in the breeze. She set her satchel on the desk and unlatched the shutters one by one. The quiet of the room reminded her of long-ago mornings on her father's porch, before her world had been split by grief and duty. But this quiet felt earned. By the time the first children arrived, she'd swept the floor and sorted the readers into neat stacks. A boy with a torn collar held his sister's hand like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. A girl with 2 braids and a wary glance lingered by the door. Rhea greeted each child by name when she could, and when she couldn't, she simply said, "You're welcome here." By midday, the lessons had steadied. The children sat straighter than she expected, attentive in a way that came not from obedience but from unfamiliar respect. When Vera raised her hand to answer a question on vowel sounds, Rhea nodded to her but said nothing else. She wanted her daughters to grow in this place the same as the others, with quiet confidence, not praise. That evening, Emmett met them at the edge of the field, his horse already cooled and grazing on the slope. He lifted Vera into the saddle, then offered Rhea his hand. "You look tired," he said, steadying her as she climbed up behind him. "I feel new." She rested her chin lightly against his shoulder. They listened. All of them. He turned the horse toward home. "That's because they saw you." The ride back was silent, save for the wind pressing through the tall grass. When they reached the house, Violet ran ahead to feed the hens while Vera sat cross-legged on the porch and began copying words from her slate into her notebook. Rhea stepped into the kitchen and found a pot warming on the stove, the smell of onions and smoked meat curling in the air. "You cooked?" she asked. "I boiled," Emmett replied. "Best I could do with what we had left." She raised an eyebrow. "You boiled stew." "I called it stew." "It might be closer to soup." She took a spoonful and tasted. "It's good." He leaned against the doorframe. "You're humoring me." "I am. But it's still good." Later, after the girls had been bathed and tucked beneath quilts, Emmett joined her on the back steps. The sky was clear, stars thick above the pasture. He held 2 tin cups, one filled with warm cider, the other with water from the well. "I saw a man in town today," he said, handing her the cider. "Said he knew your father. Said he ran a general store near Rock Creek." "He did," she said, surprised. "Before the fever took him. He spoke kindly about him. Said your father once gave his family flour when their wagon broke down. Wouldn't take a cent for it. She blinked once, then twice. He never told me that. Doesn't mean it didn't shape you. They sat in the dark for a long while, their shoulders touching. The ground beneath them was still soft from the last rain, and somewhere far off, a coyote called once, then went quiet. Rhea turned toward him. You ever think about what you'd be doing if you hadn't come back to this ranch? Sometimes. He shifted, folding his hands loosely in his lap. But none of those thoughts feel real. They don't have weight. She rested her head against his arm. This life we're making, it's not the one I expected. But it's better. Because it's ours. The next morning brought a letter from Cheyenne, stiff with the seal of the clerk's office. Rhea opened it slowly and read through the lines, her breath catching once. Emmett waited, arms crossed, one brow lifted. They've dismissed the last of Charles's claims, she said. Everything's settled. Permanently. He stepped forward and kissed her forehead. Then it's behind us. It is. In the weeks that followed, the schoolhouse filled with more children. Rhea traded sewing work for extra slates and chalk. Emmett built shelves for books, and Violet helped catalog the pages with neat, steady print. On Saturdays, the family rode into town together, and the townsfolk began to nod in greeting, not just to Emmett but to her. One warm afternoon in late summer, a parcel arrived addressed to Rhea. Inside was a small, carved box and a folded note from a man she didn't know. The note explained that her father's old ledger had been found among salvaged goods from the Rock Creek store. The box contained a brooch her mother's that Rhea hadn't seen since she was a girl. She turned the brooch over in her palm, then pinned it carefully to her collar. Emmett watched her from across the kitchen. That belonged to someone important. It did, she said. But it belongs with me now. That evening, they walked the edge of the pasture as the sun slipped low. The girls ran ahead, chasing each other with long blades of grass. Rhea looped her arm through Emmett's and breathed in the scent of sweet clover and sun-warmed earth. I used to count the days by what I had to survive, she said. Now I count them by what we're building. His hand tightened around hers. Then we've done something right. They stopped beneath the cottonwood where they'd wed, the same tree now shading the corner of the new fence Emmett had finished 2 days before. Rhea turned to him. I want to grow old here. With you. You will. And I want the girls to remember this, not the fear, not the running. Just this. They will. He kissed her then, slow and certain. No urgency, no question, just the kind of kiss that knew its place in the world. When they pulled apart, the girls were laughing somewhere just beyond the rise, and the sky had gone the color of ripe peaches. The land was quiet, but full. The house behind them stood steady, its windows catching the last of the light. There was nothing left to flee, nothing left to prove. Only the long, wide stretch of a life hard-won and deeply rooted. And they lived that life together every day after, without fear, without shadow. Just love and the peace they'd earned with it.